should be one of the most exciting parts of gardening. Or at least that's how I see it. But all too often beginners, and honestly even myself to this day, run into those frustrating mistakes that lead us to weak plants, wasted seeds, and a lot of disappointment. I feel like we have all been there. We've all had those plants, we've all had those wasted seeds, and we've all had those moments of disappointment in the growing season. So today we are going to fix that. I'm going to break down the biggest seed starting mistakes that I see and how to avoid them, so that we can take all the stress and the overwhelm out of it, and we can really set you up for a successful gardening season this year. So before we dive in, you guys already know Mama needs her cup of coffee. So let's head into the kitchen, let's make a pressed cup, and I'll catch you in a second. About the biggest seed starting mistakes and how to avoid them. I really wanted to do this video because I have been, like many of you, maybe on the other end of this, terrified to start seeds, unaware of when to start seeds, and when I did, I had a lot of deficiencies. What is it that you want to say? You want to help them too? Yeah? So it's been almost a decade now that I starting from seeds for the first time. I remember the first time I started seeds, we were saving our egg cartons. We had red Solo cups. It was certainly not fancy or efficient by any means, but I started, and I'm so glad I did because I have learned so much through that process. So today I want to break it down for you. I want to share some of the most common seed starting mistakes, how you can avoid them so you can set yourself up for a thriving garden this season, next season, and even the season after that. So I hope that you will grab your coffee or your cup of tea because we are going to dive into the weeds of it today. So a big mistake that I see often is using the wrong soil. Now, at the start of this, I just want to say I am by no means passing any judgment. When I was planning out this video, I truly sat down and thought, what would have been helpful to me when I was getting started? And the truth is, every single thing on this list, I certainly was a victim of when I first started gardening. But not only that, even as an experienced gardener who's been doing this for years and years, sometimes I still make these very common seed starting mistakes, and I have to go back and take my own advice. So just know I am your friendly little garden buddy, here to remind you guys in case you also are like me and sometimes forget these common seed starting mistakes. But the number one mistake I see probably the most frequently, and the first thing we need to address when it comes to all the seed starting mistakes I'm going to talk about today, is choosing the wrong soil. So let's chat about it for just a minute. All right, so when you are headed to the store and you're getting ready to buy your soil for seed starting, steer clear of any sort of garden soil. If it says raised bed soil or container soil, or if it has mulch in it at all, go ahead, put up your big X and just keep on walking. Why is this? Because these might be a great option to fill your raised beds. They're a really poor option when it comes to seed starting. And that's because a lot of the times the things in those mixes are too dense for your young seedling. What that means is, because it's a dense soil, it's going to be really hard for root development to take place, right? So a lot of times in those soil mixes, you'll see chunks of bark or large branches, little twigs, things like that. You really don't want that. Now, while those things might have fertilizer in them, that is, something you might think, oh, well, this is going to give my seedlings a boost of nutrients, I really want you to steer clear from that. Instead, you're going to want to look for a seed starting mix. Now, a seed starting mix versus a potting mix, the biggest difference there is no fertilizer. You are going to have to add in a fertilizer at some point, or up pot into fresh nutrients. But the pro side of going with the seed starting mix is that you're going to find no large chunks of any sort of debris or mulch. It's going to be light. It's going to be airy, it's going to be fluffy, which means it is literally the perfect host and habitat for your little new seedlings to put on established root systems, which really is going to be key. So remember, you're not looking for a garden soil, you're not even looking for a potting mix. A seed starting mix really is key. Now, we have our friend make these up for us, but if you want to make your own seed starting mix, it's actually quite easy, and I could tell you all the steps here, but when you're ready to take on that and start tackling making your own seed starting mix, check out this video right up here, because I run through the ratios and how we make it, and spoiler alert, it's way easier than you might think. I would like to pause for a second and thank Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. If you've been around for any period of time, you guys know we love Skillshare. As an entrepreneur and a content creator, Skillshare has been a go-to that me and my team have literally used on a monthly, weekly basis. So if you're new around here and you're not sure what Skillshare is, it is one of the largest online platforms. There are so many different classes and learning paths that can meet so many different needs. One of the ways my team and I have been using Skillshare this last month and even into this month is to create my year-round seed starting guide. In fact, I'm going to share that with you guys later in this video, but really we just needed to spark our creativity. We needed to figure out how do we level up our ebooks a little bit that is really just going to resonate with our audience. And man, taking these learning paths and these classes really sparked that creativity, and my team and I got to work, and now I have never been more proud to present a product to you guys than ever before. I feel good about it. I know you're gonna absolutely love it. So I hope whether you're looking to dive into productivity, maybe you're a freelancer, a writer, you wanna check out YouTube for yourself, maybe you're in photography, drawing, literally there are so many different learning paths and classes that can suit so many different needs. So the first 500 people to use my link down in the description will get your first month free. So you guys can literally get started today. You have nothing to lose. So I really encourage you guys, check out my link down in the description, figure out a class that suits your needs. Let March be the season that your creativity just goes wild. If you've been dreaming of it, I can almost guarantee you they have a class to suit your need. So thank you again, Skillshare, for sponsoring today's video. So the number 2 most common seed starting mistake I see is watering. This is the one that is still tricky to me, even though I have been doing this for years now. So we have a tendency to either overwater, which can cause a lot of issues, irreversible issues, or we underwater, which means our seedlings are drying out, and when they're so young and immature, that can mean they're gonna dry up and die. So let's chat through overwatering and underwatering and how you can find that perfect sweet spot. Now, too much water can lead to something called dampening off. Now, I'm usually always a victim of this, but this year I have really found that sweet spot with my watering system. So dampening off is essentially when you're watering your seedlings too much. And of course, we don't want them to dry out, so it's something that happens commonly out of kind of overcompensating, right? We've put all this time and this energy into buying the seeds, getting the soil right, prepping all of our trays, so we just want to make sure that we're watering efficiently. But sometimes if we're watering too much, the most common result of that is dampening off. And what happens is your seedling will start to rot at the base of your plant, and then it essentially will just collapse. And so you'll notice maybe the top of your seedling was somewhat healthy, but when it came to the stem and the bottom, it had completely rotted. And that's because it got too much water. There was too much moisture. Now, unfortunately, if dampening off has happened to you and you've noticed this and you've thought, that's exactly what's happening, there's not a way to reverse that. That seedling is just good as gone, and we're gonna have to start fresh. So I always tell people, underwater instead of overwatering, especially if you're starting out. I would rather my seedling completely dry out and look a little wilty and go back in and water it really well versus watering it too much and it dampening off, because there's no saving that. So it is kind of a quick fix in terms of how you can prevent that moving forward. But if you find that you have seedlings currently that have struggled from that, or you're figuring out, can I save it? Unfortunately, the answer is no. So let's say maybe you don't struggle with overwatering, but maybe you struggle a little bit with underwatering. Like I said, once my seedlings are established, especially when we are in the house. So right now we have got all of our seedlings in the house. We will start hardening these off in the next week or so. I am not worried about them drying out too much to the point of them completely dying. But one thing that you want to be mindful of when it comes to underwatering is making sure that they stay wet enough for those seeds to germinate. That is going to be an essential part of that process. So once you seed that seedling sprout, especially if you're still growing indoors right now, you can go a little bit longer in between the waterings, but initially you are going to want to make sure that you are aiding in germination, which is going to require water, right? Light, air, things like that. So here's my tips for underwatering and overwatering. So now let me show you my number one go-to method. Now, I'm a rebel. I'm a rebel in all things gardening. I don't like looking at seed packets. I don't like listening to planting spacing. I like to just go rogue, and it has worked for me in the past. But one of the things that I do once seedlings are established, sometimes I will water overhead, especially if I know I have good airflow. So you might watch some of these videos, and this is where I would just insert and say, do as I say, not as I do, because you're definitely going to see videos, especially in the upcoming weeks, where I am overhead watering, and that is not what I'm going to tell you to do right now. But that's because I know my plants so well. I'm usually always planting a little extra, so I'm not that concerned about it. But if you are starting out, and even just what I recommend for best practices is going to be bottom watering. All right, so when you're bottom watering, no matter what you're growing in. So these are 2.5-inch pots. We have 72 cell trays. We have got 6 cell trays. You want to make sure that you just have some sort of deep vessel. This is a 1020 that you can bottom water from. And so essentially you're going to pour water into here. Same within here, you pour water underneath. Same here, you just lift it up and pour water underneath. And what's going to happen is these plants are going to soak up the water from the bottom. So you're not smashing them down, especially if you have delicate seedlings like these herbs here, or maybe you have little bitty seedlings that have barely even sprouted. Can y'all see those? So when you bottom water, not only can the plant soak up all of the nutrients that it needs, you're gonna have stronger root systems on your plants. And obviously we are looking for those strong root systems so that they're healthy transplants when they go out into the garden. Which leads me to mistake number 3, not providing enough light. Now, this is a tricky one because sometimes you can have grow lights set up, but because of the height that you have them set up with, you'll still notice that you are having results in your seedlings that are not adequate light. And you're thinking, man, I set up my grow lights, I've got my system dialed in. Why are my plants still look like this? Well, yes, you might have provided the light, but they might have not been at the right height, which was causing some of these issues as well. So let's dive into what some of those issues might be and how quickly you can fix them right now. Have you ever seen some of your seedlings look pretty tall, really thin, and weak? Well, that's a lot like what this zinnia seed looks like in front of me. And you guys, this is a surefire sign that this thing is starving for light. Now, I do have my grow lights set up. Ideally, you want them just hovering a couple inches above your starts. But here's where I got in trouble. So you can see my ones closest to the middle, not near as flimsy. They're pretty short and stocky. They look a lot better. But on this last row here, you notice they start reaching and arching in, and it's because they're the furthest away from the light. They're several inches from where the light is to where the tray ends. And so it's really important to go through, if you're starting your seeds inside, and rotate your trays. That'll help with this quite a bit. I also have a tomato seedling I want to show you an example of as well. Well, here I have a tomato that I up-potted. And you'll notice it's a little wonky on its stem. While it's not super flimsy like that zinnia you just saw, it's certainly not optimal. And that is because, again, this is at the very end of my tray. And so it is bending. You can quite literally see it bending and reaching for the light. So if you are like me and you got these racks or maybe shelves and you're wanting to start your seeds inside, just know they are going to need a minimum of 12 hours of light a day. Ideally, you would give them anywhere from 12 to 16 hours a day. Now, some people leave them on 24/7. I don't recommend that. The idea is that we're trying to mimic the environment that they will see outside. Now, right now, we don't have 12 and 16 hour days outside, but I'm wanting to get them healthy and established, and by the time we do transplant them outside, the days will have started to lengthen up quite a bit. But you do want to turn your lights off at some point to allow them to rest, because when the light's on, it's signaling to that plant, we need to be in production, we need to grow, we need to set on strong roots, we need to put on flowers, we need to start setting fruit, etc. It's just kind of how that plant is designed. So I do recommend turn it off. So first thing in the morning, I'm coming in here, I'm flipping on my lights, and typically it's well after it's dark, right before bed, I will come through and I'll turn them off. But 12 to 16 hours is gonna be ideal. So if you've maybe tried to start seeds in maybe egg cartons or solo cups and you put them in a sunny windowsill, more than likely that sunny windowsill is not going to be enough, and you're gonna start noticing that you have tall, leggy, weak plants. So I say all that to say, invest in good lights. I'm not only using this setup in the springtime, but sometimes when I am needing to start those fall crops, it's too hot to start them out in the greenhouse. So I will even start them inside July, August, and then start hardening them off and take them outside as well, because it's just way too hot. They'll burn up really quickly. So if you invest in some good lights now, you can literally use them not just in the spring season, but you can quite literally use them year round. You could even grow microgreens in your house. So if you're noticing you're dealing with this issue, you're having thin, leggy plants that are super fragile, go ahead and invest in some really good lights. And I promise you, this is going to be a very quick seed starting mistake that you can fix and remedy pretty quickly. All right, number 4 on our biggest seed starting mistake, and this one is also a frequent flyer, and that is not knowing when to start your seeds. Hi, I'm Jill. I've been there and I have felt that. And if anyone wants to just pop into the comments so that we can all feel a little bit better about ourselves, we've all been there. I do not care how experienced of a gardener you are. There has been some point in your gardening journey where you realize you just don't really know when the best time to plant that seed is, or maybe you've missed the window. Maybe you're a little early, maybe you're a little late. So let's chat about it. So the truth is, every plant has its ideal window for germination. The tricky thing is, certain plants have a certain ideal germination, while other plants have a certain time for ideal germination. Unfortunately, there's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to seed starting and when things need to be started. Now, granted, you can group a lot of things together, but they still might not always be the same time. So let's take brassicas, for instance, right? Brassicas, you could probably group together your cabbages, your broccoli, your cauliflower, but your things like your Brussels sprouts are going to take a lot longer to get established. They're going to be a longer days to maturity. So while Brussels sprouts are in that brassica family, family, you might actually have to start it a little sooner than maybe you would your broccoli. The downside of starting your plants too early is that more than likely they're going to be very overgrown by the time they make it out into their garden. And the biggest issue with starting too early is the fact that your plants are going to become root bound. Now, there is a remedy to that. You could keep up potting, but you do always have to have a bigger size to up pot them into. You have to have room either in your house or in your greenhouse to be able to move them to, and you are going to need a lot of extra soil to accommodate continuing doing that. However, if you're like, oh snap, I think I've started my seeds a little too early, I'm noticing they're getting kind of big and they seem a little root bound, don't fret. You can literally up pot them, but I would encourage you to go ahead and up pot them, especially if you are noticing some nutrient deficiency. They've probably used up a lot of the nutrients in that existing soil, so you could give them a boost of fertilizer and that might help, or you might even just consider up potting them into fresh new nutrients to last a little bit longer until you're free of your frost date. Now, the opposite side of that is that you've started your plants too late and you don't actually have mature enough starts by the time you want them to go out for the season. Now, if you're like me and you love to grow year round, or maybe you're watching this and you think, I don't grow year round, but I would love to, go ahead and take a big sigh of relief, because if you have started too late and you didn't get them out at that ideal time, guess what? You're growing food year round. It is fine. One of the things I love is I get my tomato seedlings out weeks after every other grower in my area. And sometimes I have that moment where I'm seeing everyone planting on social media and I think, oh my gosh, but then I have to take a deep breath and I have to remind myself, I'm growing so much longer than they are in a season because I'm year-round growing. I'm succession planting, so this is only my first round of this. I can afford to let it go out late. And I'm also growing a lot of my crops in high tunnels. So even though I get my crops out 2 to 3 weeks after most gardeners in my area, I'm still yielding fruit about 2 weeks before they are, because I've got this hot box of an environment and they just thrive and go crazy. Now, one of the things I'm really excited to share with you guys this year is we're putting in an entire new raised bed kitchen garden that's going to be outside. There's actually going to be a video out on that next week, so make sure you tune back in. But I'm excited to compare just how much faster things grow in the tunnel versus outside, and also how you can do year-round growing in both. So if you have not considered growing year-round, this is your friendly reminder. Put it on your to-do list, grab your notebook, write it on your mirror, blast it on a post-it note. This is going to be your year, friend, to start growing year-round, and I'm going to be your little gardening bestie that's going to help you every step of the way. And because this is probably one of the most frequent questions I get, knowing when to plant, what to plant, how to companion plant, how to succession plant, direct seeding versus transplanting, I have literally said, you know what, this is such a common mistake. This is such a common need for a beginner and even sometimes experienced gardeners who are wanting to adopt year-round growing, that I've thrown all my resources into the year-round seed starting guide. This is your month-by-month roadmap to successful gardening. So what does that mean? I've broken it up from zones 4 to zone 10, January through December, and I share with you exactly what you need to be planting each month, whether you're direct seeding, whether you're transplanting, all of the things, and I've literally taken all of the guesswork out of it. So if you have been one of those people that have thought, man, I really want to grow year-round, this guide is for you. Or even if you've been one of those gardeners that's thought, man, I started a little too late or a little too early, I literally just thought, I'm going to set you up for success. What did I wish I had when I started? And I know for a fact this resource you're going to want. The best part is too, not only did I want to create a valuable resource, I wanted it to be so accessible to so many of you guys. So what does that mean? I've literally priced this guide at $15. It will always be at $15. If you've never signed up for our newsletter, go sign up. You're going to get 10% off. Use that 10% off coupon towards it. But I want it to be so accessible because I am on a mission, y'all. I am on a mission to get so many of you guys to say yes to year-round growing. No longer thinking about just the spring season or the summer season, but literally adopting all 4 seasons and growing year-round to take control of your family's food. And I want to link arms with you, and I want to see that happen. All right, so let's chat through the last seed starting mistake that I see all of the time. And you guys, it's skipping the hardening off process. I cannot tell you how many times I've done this. Really what I get in trouble with a lot is I'll have all my seedlings inside and they're nice and cozy in their environment. And then I'll bring them out to my greenhouse. And that's a really hard way to harden off your seedlings because one, not only are you just bringing them outside, they can get a few hours here and there. Like I mentioned, my greenhouse is a hot box. This plastic acts like UVs and it's literally kind of like you're in a tanning bed, which is great if you're growing plants, specifically if you're growing plants year round, but it's really, really tough on those seedlings. And I have so many times taken my plant babies from inside in their nice, cozy environment, moved them right outside my seed starting tunnel, have not been diligent with watering, and completely burnt them to a crisp. So even if you're not transitioning from inside to a greenhouse and you're just transitioning inside to outside, there is a step process that is literally going to be so great. So here's what happens when you take your seedlings from inside and you've got a beautiful, perfect day. There's no rain in the forecast. The winds are mild and you bring them outside and say maybe you plant them. They're going to experience something called transplant shock. And essentially what's happening is they're going from one extreme environment to another extreme environment. Now, sometimes you've got strong enough seedlings that they might die off some, they might be stunted, they might look kind of bad and they'll bounce back. But sometimes the transplant shock can be so intense that your seedlings cannot rebound. And again, nobody wants that. So what you want to do is gradually introduce your seedlings to the elements outside. It's kind of like training wheels, right? Or kind of like you and I. If we've been inside all winter, I am literally experienced this last week. I've been inside all winter. I haven't had harsh sun exposure. We had a few days in the mid 70s. I was outside all day and what happened? My little self got a little crispy. And that's because I hadn't gradually introduced myself to the sun and I got burnt as a result of that. Now, I'm robust. I bounced back, no big deal. But if I had put my plants outside on that beautiful sunny day, it would have burnt them. And like I said, sometimes your plants can't rebound from that. So really what you want to do over a 7 to 10 day process is gradually bring your seedlings outside. Now you want to not put them in direct full sunlight all day because even still you might sun scald your leaves or burn your leaves. So ideally you're putting them in a shady spot first and then letting them just experience the wind, letting them just experience the outdoors for once. And then I'll do that for a couple days. And then what I'll do the next day is maybe I'll put it in a place where it gets 30 minutes of sunlight and maybe it'll get an hour of sunlight. And I continue doing this to where each day I am extending the exposure of sun that my seedlings have to where eventually by that 10-day mark, ideally, they have been outside all day. By that time, I know that they can withstand being outside on a regular basis. But I would encourage you guys, do not skip the hardening off process, especially if you are growing rare varieties that you cannot find other places. This is something that has happened to me. I've grown a lot of rare, unique heirloom varieties of tomatoes and I didn't harden them off properly and they had transplant shocked and they died. And guess what? I couldn't get those anywhere else. So it really is a step that I would say is necessary in the seed starting process. Even though it takes a little bit of time and a little bit of work, I promise you it's worth it. All right, friends, so here are my top seed starting mistakes and how to avoid them. Unfortunately, this was just a small list. I'm sure there are a ton of more things that you've experienced, and I would love it if y'all would just comment in the comments, and let's rally and help each other. What are you struggling with? Me, Nathan, or maybe some of our other community members can chat and hop on there and we can really just help each other to make sure that we have the most successful gardening season this year. But I do know these are some of the most common ones that I myself have experienced and you might have as well. So I thought it was worth it to do this so that we could all have strong, successful gardens starting this spring. And if you want to make this process just completely foolproof, go ahead and check out my year-round seed starting guide, your month-by-month roadmap to successful gardening. Do not forget, it's going to be down in the description along with a link to sign up for a newsletter so you can grab that extra 10% off if you're not already subscribed. All right, you guys, it is a beautiful day here in Arkansas. I hope you guys are doing fantastic on this Sunday. I cannot wait to hang out with you guys next week. As you can see, we've got a lot going on here, and I can't wait to share it with you. So thanks for hanging out. I'll talk to you soon.